Absolutism. Needless to say, absolutism tends to be contrasted with relativism. The most visible form of relativism and relativistic thinking is liberalism. Liberals live as if absolutes cannot exist. That, of course, is liberals assuming an absolutist position regarding relativism. Any reasonable person can see that absolutes are not relative. If truth or morality is an absolute, then truth and morality are not qualified. There are no contingency factors involved in the administration of justice or the implementation of moral truths. But this same absoluteness cannot apply to relativism. This is the paradox and the incoherency of the relativist position. Relativism to be valid has to be an absolute. There is no other possible position. If every quality and concept is relative, then everything is relative with no exception. This is an absolutist position. If we say all truths are contingent and metaphysical statements are always meaningless, we are saying the same thing as, relativity is an absolute. The contradiction is self-evident and intrinsic to the proposition. One cannot make a dogmatic statement without it being metaphysical. All metaphysical claims are meaningless, is a meaningless statement by its own terms. Nor can we say that we must eliminate all metaphysics from our discourse, because once we utilize the absolute expression all, we have entered the metaphysical realm. What is all, but an absolute category? To say, all humans are animals, is a metaphysical claim because it is not a claim that can be empirically substantiated. We can never know what the designation of all humans are. We cannot even know, empirically, what a human or animals is. These are analytical expressions under the control of those who use the language. Taken to its extreme, relativism expresses the idea there is but one reality and it is contingent, probabilistic and relative. Meaning we cannot know the truth in a relativistic framework. We may describe things in more detail and with greater accuracy, but we cannot know the truth. The relativist is a phenomenologist. Relativists assume all knowledge is derived from the senses. But if all information is inducted from sense impressions, on what basis do our senses establish what is meaning? The lesser cannot inform the greater. Induction assumes there is a good somewhere that enables the plethora of signals to be assembled in a meaningful whole. But where is the model or algorithm that teaches us how to assemble a whole? If you are given a puzzle composed of 1,000 pieces, all of the square-shaped, and no picture to guide the assembly, how do you assemble the puzzle? An absolute only means there is a right way to organize things. There is an objective to aim for. The piles of lumber, nails, shingles and so on have a right way to be used, defined by the blueprints. Even apologetics cannot function if there is no ultimate truth to Scripture. There is no grounds for claiming Christ meant this or that, if there is not overarching truth to which all Scripture subscribes. Why would anyone do history, if dates were meaningless? Time requires we put things into sequence. Space means things are placed in a specific three-dimensional matrix. Right and left might be contingent upon the reference point, but once that point of view has been established, the position of everything else is fixed. The problem with relativism is that it is a self-refuting position. The one thing relativism cannot be, is relative. The relativity problem is that relativism is required to be an absolute if it is to exist at all. Therefore, either relativism does not exist, or if it does, it is not relative, it is absolute. This is a problem for secularists generally, but all legalists fall prey to the same ghost. If absolutes are rejected, there is no structure or organizational tableau outside of the law. But what do we rate law by? What is a just law compared to the unjust law? For most people the comparison has no meaning. The law is the law. If the law tells us a certain race or tribe or nation is evil, then evil it is and we are okay with efforts made to destroy it. Tomorrow, the law may declare yesterday's enemies are friends. But the people are the same regardless of if they are said to be enemies or friends. Only the designation has changed. The guide to what a nation is. 8. The state may decide that Christians are a dangerous extremist group. Others might object, but what recourse has those who object to the designation? We can appeal to the state for redress, but who does the state have to make the final determination? But only its own agencies. That being said, the state still requires some means to evaluate its choices in something like an objective way, otherwise there would be no constancy in the choices it makes. The state works to reduce fear despite using fear as a lever to control the population. But it does not want to rule by fear, so it reduces the application of force, especially unpredictable force, as much as possible. The state wants to give its subjects the sense that it operates according to an absolute morality, but its level of predictability is due to its desire to hold on to power and its efforts to not provoke resistance. In the same way a sheepdog will harry the sheep without causing terror, so too does the state attempt to regulate its subjects, through fear, without causing panic. When we consider the state and its proxies, we are struck by the dilemma it faces. Think of the dynamics. Imagine a raw population, meaning a people with no traditions or social mores. There is only a group of persons. It is possible for those people to go out and look for things to eat and, through trial and error, discover a reasonable menu. Over time they might even establish the basis of cooperative action and some sharing. But no one is dependent on anyone else. Whatever cooperation or sharing is done is ad hoc and situational. This is the situation that exists in subsistence cultures. Each person is basically self-sufficient, cooperating and trading more as a matter of convenience than need. So long as everyone is on the same level, power exists only on the personal level. There is little chance of one individual gaining much power over his fellows, as any configuration of individuals is sufficient to overthrow a solitary tyrant. There is always the possibility that a cohort of men can form an association to oppress a larger group. Cultures are labeled as such because they rarely generate much of a surplus. Even if a group of males is strong enough to exploit the community, the payoff will be limited, and because of the weapons and tactics available to such people, the power is likely to lay with a larger number than the smaller. There is also the problem of the individual or subgroup being dependent on the cooperation of the entire community in case of an outside threat. One cannot afford to create undue dissension in a subsistence culture. The key to a successful community, which is tied to material advancement, is specialization. Tyranny fails for the same reason liberalism fails, comparatively speaking. Being oppressive or tolerant suppresses the growth of specialization. Fails for the same reason as does the passion for diversity seen in liberal societies. Anything that does not prioritize specialization will serve as a hindrance to material prosperity. It does not matter if specialization is being stifled by oppressive dictates and micromanagement or a total lack of feedback and the removal of all consequence. Without specialization there is no progress. Without specialization we cannot experience material advancement. The question then is, what is required to promote specialization? Specifically, if liberalism and socialism fail to give proper guidance, then what path ought we be on? What idea is favorable to specialization and material advancement? Before we answer this, it has to be understood that to specialize puts the specialist at risk, exposes him or her to the threat that other people represent. If we are each self-sufficient, then it seems we do not need to depend on others. But this is not the natural order of things, it is actually an anomaly and a perversion of what ought to be the case. We were created to be dependent on others. We were never meant to be self-sufficient. The idea of the self-sufficient man is a myth and a dangerous one at that. The world is not a friendly place, it is a world full of sin and evil. Very little in the world is suitable for human use without considerable preparation. Without cooperation our life is hard and uncomfortable. One only has to imagine life as a native in North America to realize what life in a subsistence culture was like. Few modern persons could survive the lifestyle now. We have had it too easy for too long to endure the rigors of such a life. We need the help of other people, yet if we have reason to fear them, we will not trust them to the degree necessary for cooperation to do us much good. At best, tribal association helps if attacked by another tribe. It does not help the group industrialize. Fear of others, often well-founded, creates a dilemma. We need to expose ourselves to betrayal by others to gain the greatest possible benefit. But, if a certain mason specializes in making arrowheads, expecting the rest of the tribe to supply him with meat and other necessities, and is betrayed, he is in a very bad way. The tribe may take the arrowheads by force or will not or cannot supply what the artisan wants. The person who specializes must trust those whom he is permitting himself to depend on. Faith is everything. But this is the very thing missing from most communities. It is why economic development is so difficult to come by and why most places eventually resort to some kind of authoritarianism to effect economic development. No one trusts them, and so they eventually demonstrate just how right the rest of the community was, by resorting to authoritarian tactics to force compliance. This resorting to authoritarian tactics is called absolutism, but humans are not capable of true absolutism. Power is always relative. Tyranny is never absolute, this is why revolutions are always possible. The absolute power of a tyrant always relies on the contingent trust of many, many others, who see a financial benefit from propping up tyranny. We may not think of a democracy as being tyrannical, but the majority is always a tyranny over the minority. The democratic leader always uses some degree of violence and compulsion to make his rule possible. When the leader is a socialist implementing some program of social justice, this tyrannical oppression of the donor class can become serious. Witness what happened in Rhodesia and South Africa as blacks took over the reins of power. These are still democracies even though most people do not see the government as liberal. The question to ask yourself is, what do you get when you subscribe to liberalism and its relativist worldview? If truth is relative, no God and no truth. With absolutism one gets a moral absolute that permits us to know right from wrong. On top of this morality sits God as the final adjudicator. No matter how much evil you get away with on earth or how much good is taken from you, it is all made good in the end. Absolutism is not just about the present and having unequivocal standards, it is knowing that justice itself is unequivocal and unqualified. In the end we can rest assured everything is made good.